The Waves of Tech is the down-to-earth tech podcast for you, your family, and your friends. We remove all the complicated, drawn-out explanations of technology and simply talk about how technology is influencing every element of our lives, from social media and the cloud to tweeting and mobile communication. We talk tech in a different way. So plug in your devices and listen as we get ready to ride the Waves of Tech.
On episode 435 of The Waves of Tech, the intersection of technology and safety, with special guest Blaine Hoffmann of the SafetyPro podcast. To find recent episodes of the podcast and to connect with us on social media, head over to thewavesoftech.com. Well, Steve, how's it going today, man? Welcome in.
It's another Monday, and I'm looking forward to this episode so much, Dave, and you're going to explain why here in a few minutes. But hey, welcome back to another episode of The Waves of Tech, where, we just kind of open up the world and talk about technology and its influences and impacts to your life, my life. Every week, Dave, it's just something comes out of the woodwork that I go, oh man, what is that going to do to my life? And I got to think about it for a while, right? Usually I go off into a far, far distant place with my thoughts, and when it comes to the technology, it usually comes back and bites me because of, what I do for a living, but I think sometimes you just need to absorb it and move on with it.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that's what this episode is going to be all about, just sitting back, learning, being educated, and absorbing what's going on. And Steve, we always talk about the intersection of, say, education and technology, healthcare, aviation technology, and this week we're going to be diving into technology and safety. And with that, Blaine Hoffmann, he is producer and host of the SafetyPro podcast. Blaine, how you doing tonight, man?
Hey, I'm doing great, Dave, Steve. I'm glad that we were able to connect to talk about two of my favorite things, safety and technology. I'm a techie, so I love this stuff, but I want to talk about how they intersect.
We're really looking forward to the conversation. We have some good talking points outlined here in the next 30 to 45 minutes. So, Blaine, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, what you do professionally, and what you do with your podcast?
Yeah, well, I'm a safety professional, so I got into the fire service many moons ago, about 25 years ago, and from there went into prevention and education and learned a lot doing that job, and got into the private sector with managing safety risk management, things like that. So I've always done this. I've always been drawn to it. I love learning how we build things, how things are made, and how we can improve those processes through whether it's lean manufacturing or lean construction. And along the way, how do we integrate safety into those production or build processes? And you can't avoid it. Technology is going to come into play even way back when I was first starting out. So that's sort of a little bit about my background and how I got where I am today. But along the way, I've always seemed to be toying with either the latest gadgets, or I've been accused of, I should say, of being a gadget head. But I've always tried to see hey, I bet you I can use that to do this at work. And, instead of just picking these things up as odd curiosities, I actually try to see where we can make some practical applications of technology in the workplace. And so I've always been drawn to it, and I push it today on my podcast a lot. Anybody that listens will tell you. I'm really harping on other safety pros to tell them to, you got to ditch the spreadsheets. I love Microsoft and everything they've done for the industry with Microsoft Office. You can't see me right now, but I'm the sarcasm is not coming over real well. But, spreadsheets and Microsoft database or other databases, and the time suck that it creates when we sit down to dive through this data and create pivot tables and sort through everything and reorder everything just to be able to get a simple trend. I think we can rely more on technology to help us do some of the heavy lifting, and that frees us up to be able to, which is ironic, using tech to facilitate being more human, and that is frees me up to spend more time where it matters, and that is with the people where the work is being done. And as a safety professional, time is the only really thing you have to invest in this case. But I think technology has really helped us come a long way. Even back when I got my first pocket PC, I'm really dating myself here, but it was Windows Mobile. And I got an HP Pocket PC. I had a little hardcover case that flipped down. It looked like a tricorder. It was really cool. I started using it for, everyone used it for their date book and, contacts and emails. I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this for a mobile accident reporting system, and I could take it around to job sites with me and document when incidents occur and jot them down instead of using paper and I can go back and sync it with my desktop. And so I created the MARS, a mobile accident reporting system, way back in mid 90s. Then I got my first tablet PC. It was insane. I just never stopped. So I'm always looking to push the envelope on how we can integrate technology with safety processes. So that's, again, a little bit about me and how I got here, but you can tell I geek out about this stuff. It's really great.
No, it's really cool. That's a really great introduction, Blaine, into what you do and sort of your background with technology and being adaptable and really looking at, okay, yes, you're using something that is completely, at the time, innovative. People use it for calendars, but now you're using it to create a structure around your work environment and using technology to the best available means that you have. And that means, like you said, mobile, safety reporting. And that's a really cool step. And I think you're right when it comes to safety and beyond into different industries. Utilizing the technology and viewing it in a different angle so that you're using technology and capitalizing that utility for what you need to and how to kind of really create your own work environment based on that. And I really love that. So let's dive into it. One of the cool podcasts I listened to over at the SafetyProPodcast.com of yours was talking about drone use in the safety industry. Now, Steve, I'll let you chime in here. I know you are a certified drone pilot, and unfortunately, when I've test drove yours, I broke a couple of the propellers, but I stayed away from your expensive one. But you've used drones a little bit in your business, and so let's introduce what you've done, and then Blaine will get into a little bit with the safety industry.
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting topic, and a little caveat here is you are no longer authorized to fly any of my drones ever again.
Yeah, I got my
it's
license
too expensive
revoked.
to replace those based on your inability to correctly fly one. I'm teasing, though. It's a very interesting thing, and I do presentations. I actually did one for an organization that you're involved with, Dave, on drones, and one of the highlights, one of the bullet points was drones within particular environments where safety is a concern. And, since I am a Part 107 drone pilot, periodically I do have some tasks that I go do that are really cool because there's a sense of helping people not being injured by doing so. One of them, in fact, was doing inspections on the big wind turbines that are in my area so that people don't have to put themselves in harm's way and things like that. But there's a lot of utility to this. We can think of firefighting and many other aspects where there could be personal injury or worse due to an environment.
Yeah, that's incredible. And that's the first thing I thought of when I heard about using drones in general. And of course, this goes back to what I was talking about earlier. A buddy of mine said, "Hey, I've got this drone." And I'm like, "Well, great. What are you going to do with it?" He's like, "Well, I'm going to fly it around." And I thought, well, okay, that's cool, but what are you going to do with it? He goes, "It's got a camera." And I said, "Oh, it's got a camera on it?" He said, "Yeah, it's got a camera." And I said, "Wow, how good is the camera?" And we started talking. And of course, he doesn't know it, but I'm thinking every little answer he gave me, I'm thinking, okay, I could use that to inspect a roof. I can use that to inspect a communications tower. You could probably get different types of cameras, like a FLIR camera for hotspots on an electrical system, or there's just the infrared cameras. And then my mind just started going, and now it turns out OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, for those who don't know, they sort of enforce workplace safety rules and regulations in this country, in the U.S. So, OSHA is now using drones for that very reason, is because their compliance officers may not be able to access certain areas of a facility. It may be unsafe. It's a hazardous process, chemical, petroleum plants, things like that. So they use drones all the time. And it's an incredible way to use this technology to facilitate your work, but also keep people safe. And companies are starting to pop up now that do this. They offer services for inspecting buildings, physical structures, bridges, for example. Think about inspecting bridges. Man, I don't know when the last major bridge collapse was. And, every so many years we question, infrastructure in this country and the ability to inspect these things. And, we don't have the resources and personnel. But drones, we can automate some of this and send somebody out with a drone to inspect, bridges in half the time. That can use certain imaging technology. I've seen a drone pressure washer. Have you seen this?
No way.
Yeah, so
I haven't heard of that.
it's got a PEX tube and probably a coil of so many 100 feet of PEX tube, and that's what pushes the liquid up. But look it up, Google this, you'll find it, and it does window washing. I saw them cleaning the turbines. You mentioned turbines for wind farms, because big problem with those is keeping those clean. Yeah, so they're using drones for pressure washing now. And all of it protects workers. And folks will say, well, we're losing jobs. And, throughout history, we've always had iterations of this, but it's creating a whole new industry as well at the same time. So I'm not as afraid of technology as some people talk about. Oddly enough, when they talk about being afraid of technology, they're probably tweeting about it on their smartphone. But adapting technology as a tool to help us be more efficient, safer, quicker, more productive, that's a good thing. So the drones was fascinating to me, and anybody who's even a novice and is doing, playing with drones, flying them around and wondering what to do next, start a business where you can actually help people, whether it's aerial photography, maybe it's inspections, doing roof inspections. Figure out how to do it. Fill a need. There's a niche for this, and the businesses can actually use this service. So that's where I think creativity and entrepreneurship and technology also come together as well. But certainly for safety, I don't want to send any of my employees up on the roof, especially in the Midwest here in this time of year in the winter. I don't want them up there, but they may have to go up and inspect something. A drone can do that.
Yeah, I think building on your point, Blaine, when you talked about, creating new industries, you're creating a new industry of drone pilots and those individuals that know how to process and use that data, for whatever means they're doing. But also, if you look at it from a business standpoint, you're freeing up another worker that you wouldn't have to send as a 2-person job. You can now do a lone worker program, and you have that other person who can work on other projects, whether that's in-person inspections, whatever it may be doing in the office. But you're building an industry, and you're also allowing your staff to be more flexible, get a lot more productivity, a lot more efficiency based out of that. And so when you have those high hazard areas, those hard to access, regions of wherever you're at or whatever job function you're doing, I think that's really when the drone industry really kind of tips its hat above a lot of this. And not only can you, save yourself a lot of money, but you can capitalize and build those skills and provide some professional development for your staff along the way.
Yeah, exactly. And we're talking about drones in the air, but there's also another naturally occurring substance that we ignore: water. So look at underwater welding. I did some training, OSHA training. Years ago, I was the chair of the OSHA outreach training program for an Ed Center, an official OSHA Ed Center. So we had all kinds of companies come through for training, and we had an underground or underwater construction company come through, and I said, you guys got to tell me what you do. Just the name of your company is insane. And they said, we have a dive team, scuba, and we dive into all over the world these nuclear cooling towers. They're filled with water cooled, and we have to go and inspect rods. Sometimes there's a piece, a washer or a nut that comes loose and gets in, and we have to get that out. Drones, of submersibles, of course, but it's same principle. We're using remote controlled, device, a vehicle to dive down. Think about the safety involved there. So however you think about it, technology, I think, should be embraced in a positive way to make our lives easier and safer. So I think this is an incredible use of the technology.
Yeah, well, let's move on to some online training, pros and cons. I know as working in some safety capacity at my job, Blaine, is sometimes when you have in-class presentations, people kind of moan and groan, gripe a little bit about having to sit for 30 minutes or an hour to get a lecture on safety in some form or fashion. But then also when you go to an online training base, people can, do it at their own pace. They can do a little bit of self-guided. The downside is you do have a lot of distractions. You may lose some context as far as that. What have you learned incorporating online training and technology with safety that you can pass along as some information for us here?
Yeah, so the best approach that I've found, it's still the best approach today, I found years ago when e-learning became very popular, is you need a blended approach. You need to be able to combine some practical exercises, instructor-led sessions with some self-guided learning, whether it's e-learning or distance learning on their own. And that's key. The other thing that you can really leverage with e-learning is the use of video, and YouTube, Netflix on demand, streaming on demand when people binge watch stuff. Being able to grab so your average iPhone now, the camera quality is incredible, right? So you grab your iPhone, you can do a demonstration at a job site or on the production floor of the correct way to lock or tag out a machine or to inspect something, and you can upload it to an internal site that notifies everybody in the company that a new post was made. And then, they're learning, but then getting the snippets of information, and it's using technology in the same way that you would with e-learning. E-learning is more, formal, where you capture the video, you bring it into a program, you edit it, you put some text and voiceover, and then you assign it to people, and they have to sit and take it and complete it. When, we can start broadening our mind a little when we think about e-learning and say, electronic learning, it's just learning in some electronic format. It doesn't have to be through a learning management system like an LMS where I've got a quiz and a grade and I can check attendance. You can easily deploy, any medium and small size company can easily deploy this technology using something like Slack or something like Facebook Workplace. I think they're still around with that. But you can use, or a SharePoint site, an internal SharePoint site where you can do this type of on-demand learning or ad hoc learning when you see a moment that's teachable, and you can share that. So I think that's the future of e-learning, is this organic sort of as the opportunities present themselves, the ability for us to capture that in a neat, clean way, and it's easy without needing a whole lot of equipment, and be able to share that and distribute that. I think that's the future. That's what I want to see happen more of.
I find it very interesting that where we've come over, last few decades, I would say, and I don't want to get off topic, but when I first went in the Air Force in the early 1970s, I was in aircraft maintenance. During those times, we would work on aircraft without safety harnesses. We would clean our hands with methyl ethyl ketone, which is now an incredible carcinogen. We wouldn't wear masks. Guys would smoke when refueling airplanes. Quality assurance would come out, and you would go, oh crap, here come the safety guys. So you would shut down your operation and kind of go hide or stop what you were doing. It's certainly not that way anymore, and I'm glad it's not. And what I'm getting to is, Blaine, that people think that safety, they have no place in their life for safety. Get away from me. I don't want to talk about it. Just let me do my job. And so when we're talking about this educational aspect, do you have that kind of fights between the different sides of safety versus none?
No, not so much anymore, because of the culture that has developed in industry and even construction today. You have pockets of resistance, but for the most part, I'm optimistic. Every day I engage with different companies and workers, how receptive they are. And I think it's a generational thing. I think, again, dating myself, having grown up in the 70s. Hey, thank you for your service, by the way. My father was in the Air Force 6 years. Active duty. So I remember seeing some of his friends as a child and hearing some of the stories, and then first getting into the industry in the fire service, seeing the results of not paying attention to safety and seeing it change through the 90s. I think it's a generational shift. So you have, even millennials now that are, there's two more generations coming into the workforce now. They have different expectations, right? Right or wrong, good or bad. I'm not here to bash anybody. My experience with millennials is they're hungry, they're eager and willing to learn. They are sort of driving the implementation of, or integration of technology, I should say, in the workplace, not just with safety. I mean, because they have these expectations of, hey, I've grown up with a device in my hand, and then I come to work and I've got, the equivalent of an abacus that I got to work with. That's not acceptable. So they're actually demanding sort of this culture shift that we're seeing in industry today across the board. And I think that's good. I think that, what businesses have changed in their mindset when it comes to safety is they're seeing it as, one, an employee benefit. And it's just like a health benefit, just like health insurance, wellness, things like that. The way we treat our workers and care for them when they're at work is viewed now as an employee benefit, right? So that's one. Two, school now, just even business school. You go to get your MBA. I have my master's, and when I took my master's program in the early 2000s, I had to take business statistics. I had to take, ethics and safety. I had to take these courses that I think more folks are taking now. And so they see the value, the business connection between protecting workers and the profit, the bottom line, right? The margins. So when we injure workers and we have high turnover, we have to hire more people. We have to have people in-house to hire those people, HR people, recruiters. We have to train them, and there's that learning curve, so they don't really get up to full production capacity for some period of time. And then we have a certain amount of that turnover, 30%. We know that the longer we keep workers, the more productive they are. And one of the things that can cause us to, lose that productivity is when we have workplace injuries and accidents. Things break. Preventative maintenance is another great example. Poor quality suffers. So, if a business wants to be the best at cost, quality, delivery, and safety, you have to be good at all of them. But safety is sort of that unified, that glue that holds it all together. It's a basic human, instinct to be and feel safe, right? We can't really do much else until we feel safe to kind of, focus on a task at hand, for example. So more business owners and operators and managers at a senior level are seeing safety as a tool, a business tool that we use to get work done. It's like quality now. It's how we do our work, and we can't compromise it because the cost is too great. I think between that and then the human aspect, the moral, ethical aspect of not injuring workers, those two combining makes a perfect mix for people to sit down at the table, workers and leadership to sit down at the table and say, okay, how are we going to get this done? And that's where we start opening the door to, the Internet of Things, the connected machines, the smart industrial technology that we have, the internet, wearables, and all these things that we can use to help facilitate that. We're now in a sweet spot with the several different generations all in the workplace at the same time with these old school sort of hard work ethic, mentality, and then the innovative sort of demanding certain things in the workplace and coming to some sort of compromise in the middle. I think it's a great time right now in industry, and it lends itself perfectly for finally adopting a lot of this technology that, even in late 90s, I was scratching my head saying, why aren't more people doing this? I mean, when's the last time you saw a fax machine, right? Even email isn't as prevalent anymore. It's text and instant messaging and various apps that take off of that type of technology and utilize it. So I think, today I don't see as much resistance because of innovation, because it's easier to access this information, and training is easier and more fun and more engaging. And it's just easier and simpler to be safe more so today than it was years ago. I think that's just been my experience. What about you guys, especially Dave, Steve, you guys, at work, how has it changed for you? Yeah,
it's definitely been changing. I think to your point that, it's all about creating a community, a like-minded mindset between not only, staff that are in the field, but mid-level management to senior management and everything in between. And this is, whether you are working in private industry or in the public industry like me, it's about providing those tools and those resources to your employees, a combination of online and in-person. And Blaine, to your point, one thing I think is absolutely totally underutilized in safety training, whether it be online or in person, is the use of good videos. There are very many times when I've seen just simply pictures handed out, or, pictures on a slideshow, or pictures in an incident report that show this. We need some more videos, as you said, of individuals conducting work, doing some evaluation on their work process. Again, whether it's a lockout, tagout, whether it's talking about refueling systems, whether you're handling different materials, how to utilize your personal protective equipment to keep yourself safer. I think those are really good productions that companies can put together that really lend themselves to demonstrating, okay, this is what we are doing to protect you, instead of just the mundane, go through the motions, do the quiz, as you said. But I've noticed more of a community with these safety committees and individuals out in the field that are essentially advocates for yourself and for safety. And I think that goes a long way. So personally, I've been feeling community has really been broadening the importance of safety from the top to bottom.
You're absolutely right. Community, you're spot on. And I'm glad you said that. The sense of belonging to something, to a group, whether it's a peer group or a social group or something like that, it endears us to, in this case, our workplace. And we become a part of something. So psychologically, no doctor, and you should call one if you question what I'm about to say. I would encourage you to. But my hunch is that, psychologically, that lends itself to a couple of things. One, employees that are willing to stay at a workplace and contribute to making it better instead of just griping about conditions and leaving. They're invested now because they're a part of a group. They feel committed to a group. They don't want to let their coworkers down. They have a quote unquote friend at work, right? So they're invested, because isolationism in society or in a workplace is bad. When people are isolated, they are disconnected. We don't want that. So building a community, and safety is a great catalyst for that. You can build a community of workers around, something like not getting hurt, right? Not getting your arm caught in a machine, or, out on a road, getting struck by vehicles, or if you've got, municipal workers with trench collapses, things like that. I think everybody can get around that notion, and that kind of just is a seed that you plant that does what you just said. It strengthens and builds a community, and then once you have that foundation, productivity, efficiency, profits, whatever you want to, put your finger on, are easier to attain.
I would just add one thing, and I'm glad this separation has come closer. I'm really glad to hear that, because I'm surprised that I'm still alive after some of the crap we did back in those days, to be honest with you. I think a lot of people have this notion that safety is an industrial kind of word. And it's not. And I will give you an example that my wife works in the local water district where we live. And one day somebody had set down a cardboard box where it shouldn't have been, and she tripped over it and broke her elbow and ended up having to have an elbow replacement and was like the bionic woman for almost a year. So safety is a universal word and not just an industrial impact or a flavor based on big brute guys, putting steel girders together.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. The number one killer across all, and this is workplace, by the way. This is just workplace fatalities. The number one killer across all injuries, or industries, I should say, is motor vehicle accidents. Just straight up motor vehicle accidents. But other than that, when you divide construction and industrial, it's falls, people falling off of stuff. Same level, slips, trips, falls. Exactly what you just said happened to your wife. People don't understand that today, even with all the advances we still have in the U.S. Just shy of 5,000 fatalities a year. And I've been through 5 in my career where I've either investigated, or I was at the company where they happened, or it was a coworker that it happened to. So far, I've not met anybody that, 1, deserved it, 2, knew it was coming. Right? That's the point. They would have stayed home if they knew. Nobody thinks it's going to happen to them, and they were all doing their regular job at the time. It wasn't some weird, strange act of God that killed them. It was something they had done 100 or 1,000 times before. An accident doesn't care how long you've been doing the job, doesn't care if you're a nice person, whether you deserve it, doesn't care. An old fire captain told me once, everybody dies at work, dies surprised. And it stuck with me. And so, that's why I'm passionate about it. For what you just said, these are just normal, everyday people that went to work one day and didn't come back. And we can do something about that. We can use technology. We can use whether it's to enhance training, to engage people more, to get their attention. But we have to continue to do it. We can't go back to what it used to be, even when I was younger, getting into the industry, whether it was construction or general industry. The safety rules we have today were written on a stack of bodies. I know it's crude. It sounds crude, but we have to learn from the mistakes of our past so that we don't repeat them for the workers in the future. And I'm excited about the future of safety using technology. Things like, if we could, I want to give you some examples of where I've seen safety being, or gadgets or technology being used to enhance safety.
Yeah, absolutely, because that was going to be my next sort of transition here, was let's talk about how technology in the workplace, whether it's in the office setting, industrial, how some of those hazards that we've been, exposed to can be reduced by technology in the workplace. There is this big push. It is 2019. We have the Internet of Things. Everything is is everything is empowered by Wi-Fi. Everything is somehow connected to a phone, a sensor, a device, a tablet, whatever it may be. And so we see, Blaine, a lot of remote sensors. We see digital assistants like Alexa being integrated into projects. We have augmented reality where software engineers and services are really beginning to expand how to keep workers safe. And we were talking a little bit that you really think the sky is the limit in this space, and you can envision some things in the future that could, one, protect our employees and also protect ourselves and kind of empower us when we go to the workforce and when we enter in these high hazards or even low hazard areas that, like you said, when we show up to work, we expect to come home. So what are some of those devices, some of those innovations that's going on in the workplace to help reduce those hazards?
Yeah, you touched on several of them. One, remote sensors are key. We've had sensors. We have gas monitors. We have carbon monoxide detectors. You have them in your home. You have, a smoke detector. But think about how limiting most of these are. You have to be in that area for the most part to notice something is wrong or to hear it, or it has to be loud enough that it gets your attention when you're in the next room or on the other floor, something like that. Well, now we have all of these are connected, and it could be wired where they're all connected. When one alarm goes off, all of them go off, and then you have some voice comes over a speaker, fire's detected, get out, things like that. I've got in my home even, I have them all connected wirelessly. I get a text alert when one of them goes off. I can pull it up on my phone and see which part of the house where it picked up. The voice in the house, it actually says smoke was detected in the hallway. You can program it and everything. So we've come a long way. So when we say connected, Internet of Things, everything can be connected. It's just got to have a purpose. It's got to make sense and support sort of what we're after. So when it comes to remote sensors, keeping in mind, the example of the smoke detector, imagine, an employee that has a 4-gas monitor that goes into the water tank at the water treatment center to clean it out and do some preventative maintenance, and the monitor goes off. That's great. They're wearing the monitor and they're down into the tank. Hopefully they have enough time when that alarm goes off that there's some toxic gases being released from, the sludge they're stirring up down there, maybe hydrogen sulfide, that they're able to get out. So then we extend that to, okay, well, we're going to put the pump up top and have a monitor. OSHA requires, if confined space entry, you have a monitor, we call it an attendant, right? So we're going to drop a hose that's going to draw this air up, and it takes a good minute and a half, depending upon the length of hose, to get up to the sensor that they're holding. And when it goes off, I have to yell down, hey, you got to get out. Or I hoist them up because I've now tethered them to a winch, and I'm gonna haul them out against their will. Well, with the Internet of Things, with connected devices, we can kind of string all of this together without sort of the strings, if you will. And I think that makes everything safer. I think that the operator down in the pit needs to know when an alarm goes off. I think the attendant up top needs to know. And I think, quite honestly, somebody in an office somewhere, whether it's security or EMS, can be notified at the same time, so you can get response on the way before somebody tries to make a rescue, determines that they can't really pull the person out, then has to run and grab a phone. I think we can connect all of these things together. Remote sensors without people being there, being able to detect gas leaks, water leaks, things like that, and be able to notify us to shut off valves without having to send somebody down to do regular inspections and detect these things. Those things all make it safer, and that's an example of connected devices, and a lot of them are being used today. You mentioned Alexa. I'm going to whisper that because in my where I'm recording right now in my little recording studio in my office in my home, if I say that name too loud, I'll have four of them will light up and wait for my command. So we use them all the time in our home. We have connected power strips that connect my son's leopard gecko, his little lizard, and the heat lamp has to be on all the time, but then the basking light and the UVB light can only be on during the day, and the humidifier has to kick on at certain. So I've got it all connected with Alexa. It happens automatically. Keeps this little guy alive. So those are all examples. Well, in the workplace, we can do the same thing. All the modern, devices that we use to make our lives easier at home can be used at work. Imagine using Alexa to record a safety concern. Let's say you're in a work area and you're at a machine and it's in need of some maintenance. And let's say in perfect company. You have Alexa at several different workstations. You could say, Alexa, record a maintenance request. And maybe Alexa says, okay, which machine? And I'm at machine 123. And then you just answer the Q&A back and forth, and she goes, okay, I submitted a maintenance request. And you can keep going. Smart glasses, another one with augmented reality. Imagine maintenance or service technicians going into somebody else's facility. They're not really too familiar with the layout. They're a service tech coming in as a contractor. And let's say you can load a 3D map or download it onto the smart glasses and go into this facility, and an alarm goes off. You could have sort of this overlay, this augmented reality of everywhere you turn your head, it's got an arrow that tells you where to walk to get out in an emergency. Or you can just use the devices in different ways like that. Being able to call somebody and do a Skype or a FaceTime through the glasses, being able to see what the technician is seeing and say, hey, it's that red wire on the right, you have 3 seconds left to cut it, hurry, that whole bit. But that kind of technology is available today, and we just need companies to invest in exploiting that and seeing how we can use this more. That's why I say the sky's the limit. Everything from just personal protective equipment and smart fabrics that have sensors and that measure biometrics for heat and pulse and heart rate, breathing rate, things like that. That's all available to us today. Whether it's police and fire, actually police and the fire. So I'm going to talk about those two industries real quick, because a lot of this stuff comes from that. Do you remember the I've fallen and I can't get up commercials?
Yeah, absolutely.
Medical alert bracelets and so. In the fire service, we had a pass system. We had this little box that would scream if you didn't move for like a minute, right? You had to, and we would just wiggle our hips, and it would shut off if we were standing there waiting at a car accident, waiting for something to happen. And if you didn't move, it would go off. Well, that's to alert people that maybe there was somebody down. Somebody went down and they're not moving. We can go and find them. Police officers, if they go in the horizontal position, which I hear is really bad for police officers, it automatically summons an officer down, and everybody and their sister come hauling to the scene, to their location. This technology can be exploited. It could be used in the workplace. Imagine lone worker safety. Why can't we use the same technology for lone workers that are out at a processing plant or out in the field doing field work, service work, when they haven't checked in, we haven't detected motion, or just straight up biometrics from a smartwatch, where if something were to happen, it will send an alert to somebody. These are all things that we have today that we can apply to workplace safety. And most of us are using some form of this already. My Apple Watch, if we go too long, it's just going to yell at me to stand up. I've been sitting too long. So, hey, ergonomics, that's safety too, right? So I think that if we really take a look at the technology available today and the challenges we face in most workplaces, whether it's an office, industrial, construction, municipal, doesn't matter, that we can see opportunities to integrate technology to make our jobs safer. And that's what I push on the podcast. I talk to safety pros all the time, safety professionals, and I tell them, if you're not automating some of this stuff, if you're not using a digital dashboard, if you're not using and developing this technology, you're missing out on huge opportunities to be efficient, save tons of money for the company, engage workers, build that community, and just free up time that you need to actually go out and engage workers where the work happens. So that's where I see the future going, is exploiting some of this technology even more. Have you guys seen some unique applications where technology has enhanced work?
Yeah, Blaine, that was actually going to be my question over to Steve real fast, is that we use Alexa in our house, and we've used, I've never wore any like smart glasses or anything that's augmented reality, and I've understood how remote sensors and work with or at home with CO2 and the like, but I've never really, Steve, I don't know if you have really taken that jump to say, how can we exploit these? What is the usability of these in the workplace? Now, I've been exposed to a few little remote sensors that we've been at work, but I love that concept, Blaine, of that we're able to utilize what we consider just be a regular household system and integrate it into the workplace. What do you think about that, Steve? I think that's pretty exciting. Like the Internet of Things to me could really revolutionize and really change the way employees think about safety and also the way employers and developers and engineers think about these things.
Well, after listening, I could come up with a whole new package that I could be selling my customers now based on technology because of safety. I say that jokingly, but it's true in that I think in a lot of cases for the masses, that kind of thinking process is not going on. And, oh, by the way, a lot of the companies I deal with don't even have a safety officer or a safety individual. It's kind of like each for their own, which is, I think, kind of sad. But when we talk about these technologies, Dave, it's very interesting. And I have a couple. And for those that don't know, I own an IT company, so I get involved with a lot of the intricacies when it comes to their network infrastructures and things like this. But we're also now finding that they are becoming more interested in using the technologies for detections of certain things based on their business rules, and also from a communication standpoint, which also leads to better security and safety. But on a mass scale, I mean, I don't see this yet, but certainly Blaine has the vision that he's going to tell the world, here's what you guys really need.
Yeah, it's interesting. You get to see a lot of different companies, and hopefully you see them through a different lens now, and you'll be able to recommend some things that they can use. And don't discount I call it passive technology, QR codes. Right? Something as simple as a QR code. Imagine being able to walk through a facility. Let's say it's an industrial processing plant, chemical processing plant. You walk up to a machine and it has to get an inspection done. And let's say there's a QR code right on the side of that machine. You take your smartphone, you scan that code, and it opens an inspection checklist. So it prompts you on what to check, the condition it should be in. Maybe gives you an example of what is a bad condition, what is a good condition, and you complete that and you hit submit, and boom, it's filed. You've done your check, and it's all in your pocket. You're walking around with all these audits and inspections in your pocket. Gone are the days where we're walking around with tall boots, black hats, and clipboards. Right? Safety people need to ditch that stuff.
Absolutely.
Yep. But the other thing it does though. It's incredible. It drives accountability for safety. It takes safety out of one or two individuals' hands and puts it in the hand of every single employee in that facility. It empowers them. Every one of them can do an inspection. Every one of them can actually report a hazard, and empowers them. Gone are the days where it's like, oh, safety? Well, that's Blaine's job. That's the safety guy. Or that's the safety gal. She'll take care of that when she comes around. I don't have to worry about it. No, it's a pull system. That employee, we actually get to support that employee in the work he or she has to do and say, what is it that you need to continue to do this job that you're really, really good at? Okay. What is it that you need? What tools do you need? We do it with quality. We do it with maintenance. We can do the same thing with safety. So QR codes, another cool thing I've seen with QR codes is to be able to walk up to somebody, whether it's a badge or a QR code on their hard hat, especially at a job site, and you could scan it and you could tell what kind of training this individual has had so that you can actually task them with certain work. Like, well, I can't have Blaine go grab that, unload that truck because he doesn't have his forklift training. So you could scan that real quick and see, who's got what kind of training. And I'll tell you about a company that's using that right now is iReportSource. iReportSource is a company, and their story, and I'll give you a tip. Christy Brown, the CEO, you need to talk to her. She has an incredible story along these lines of how she kind of developed this technology, this environmental health and safety management system, digital system. So we call it an EHS digital system. But she came up with this idea after a couple of clients. She was in the insurance business. One client had a fatality. And she discovered, just sheer lack of paperwork, of inspections and training, things of this nature. This actually was designed to make it easy for small and medium-sized businesses to do these things and to track it in one place, right? Takes the guesswork out of it. But they're using QR codes in that very same way. You can walk up to anybody at a job site and check their training history, when the last training session they had, if their training has expired. You could do workplace audits. And when I connected with iReportSource, I don't work for iReportSource, by the way, and I'm not affiliated. I don't get money if people do a demo with them. So it's not a pitch, it's not a sale. And I even say it on my podcast. I don't care what you choose. You just choose something. Just make sure it works for you. But what really connected with me in learning about iReport's story is just this. It was born out of necessity. They saw a need and an opportunity, and technology was the answer. And it made workplaces safer. And so technology and development in the field of apps and connectivity is still growing, but companies like iReportSource are sort of at the forefront and kind of pushing the envelope. And so doing things like inspections. I mentioned inspections, be able to scan a QR code and do an inspection. Being able to record an accident and an injury, and then being able to open your phone and open the app and just see how many injuries we've had. Having this digital dashboard for the business. How many near misses have we had? How many inspections are overdue or not done? That kind of stuff is right at the tip of our fingers now, where not even, I would say before, it's still happening today, unfortunately. I've got safety professionals with 20 plus years of experience, multiple degrees and certifications. They're rock stars. They're great people persons, and they could be out there engaging workers, and you know what? They're spending 60% of their time, almost a day or more a week on the low end, in a room running spreadsheets, trying to get these trends, trying to figure out, Bob didn't turn in their weekly inspection. And it's all because we make Bob walk all the way up to the front, grab a sheet of paper, walk all the way back out to the work area, walk around, write notes down. Oh, wait, I have a picture I want to take. So grab their phone and take a picture of that. And then, I have to email that later because I have to turn this paper back in all the way back at the front. And then I'm going to email the picture. And then I've got to receive all this stuff. And then I got to sit down and but I'm busy, right? I feel busy. So I think I'm productive. And I'm showing some value, like, look at all this stuff I did. I'm looking at that going, what are you, a knucklehead?
Yeah.
And so
it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is.
Steps. Yeah.
And when I explain it that way, this is exactly what we're doing. And so I harp on safety professionals all the time. And that's why iReportSource and I have worked together on we're helping to improve some of their audits and checklists. So I've actually collaborated with them. They listen to the podcast. So, look, do something. Find something that works. I don't care what it is. Just find something. I'm telling you, these companies are out there and they are willing to help you. And they have the products and services that can make that happen. And technology is the answer when it comes to a lot of these things. Talk about accidents, your wife's accident. Being able to have a digital file, right, of that accident, of that injury, being able to send that to doctors, attorneys, God forbid, but, being able to have that in one place, memorializing that, and not having papers floating around in different file drawers and cabinets. Gone are those days. We should not be doing that anymore. We should be digitizing as much of this as possible, and it's portable that way. And so that's sort of the technology. When I brought up iReportSource, that's sort of the technology that they're developing, and it's available right now to be able to keep this. And as OSHA even pushes further, year over year, the last several years, of digital or electronic reporting of injuries and accidents for every company in the U.S. being able to submit these reports. It's easy to do this now. You can do this. So you can get on board with this technology. So what about you guys? I love hearing your experiences, especially in, IT, going into all these businesses and working in your municipalities. Where do you see, or have you seen, opportunities for EHS management tools like this to improve the way you manage the business?
Yeah, I work in the municipalities, and for us, we use some journey management softwares and some tools out there. We do have, I work in the waste management business, and so we do have some remote sites, and we have, we're also using, to get back to a little bit of the IoT thing, we're using a lot of messaging apps to report incidents. We're using some of those things to relay information from the field. As far as reporting, tracking accidents, we actually have our HR division that tracks that. I'm not particularly real keen on what they're doing, but looking at things like iReportSource are really cool means to pass that information along, because you're right, having a digital footprint as far as what happened to you in a certain incident without the risk of losing that paperwork. And I think putting the reporting in the hands of the individuals, rather than having to say this whole call your supervisors, your supervisor isn't there, call their supervisor. Okay, if they're not there, make sure you email or make sure you text. Again, a big time suck. And when you look at things like iReportSource, that really provides not just the safety professionals, but every employee in the business that's working working diligently to track their accidents and report their illnesses and injuries. And I think this is a really big step. And of course, it brings up a lot of conversation, Steve, about having connectivity and applications in the field and that mechanism in place to make sure your funding and your budgeting is there, not only for these EHS management systems, but also for the technology, for the app development, the updates, also having your internet connectivity in what a majority of the country works in more of a rural area. And I know that can sometimes be an issue. So Steve, have you seen some of this in, like Blaine's question about where you're working at? Have you been exposed to some of that?
I see a lot of different things because my customer base is so vast, from water districts to construction companies to parks and recs to dental facilities. And I think each one of those are certainly different in their own respect. Here's from what I do, what I see. And this is a pretty interesting discussion based on what you see in an area of the county, Dave, and Blaine seems as a safety professional, that customers do come to me with ideas and things that they would like to do, or I may suggest something. But here's the real bottom line. Once it comes down to the brass tacks, they don't want to pay for an infrastructure change or a development requirement or whatever the case may be because of dollars and cents. So even though they may have great ideas, they typically do not want to move forward because of the investment costs when they are unsure of what the payback is. Certainly, I think we would all agree that there is the payback when it comes to safety cannot be put in terms of dollars and cents. However, when we have discussions with higher levels of management, that desire of implementation goes away even more quicker. Hey, CFO, what's the bottom dollar on getting this implemented? Oh, we can't do that. And unfortunately, a lot of times that work goes to waste.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And that's why it's important that technology companies, folks that are, startups or existing companies that are looking to come up with these ideas, these technology answers to problems that we face in business and industry, that one, it has to be accessible, has to be affordable, it has to be something we can actually implement. That's why some of these apps are so popular, because we got cell phones. Most of these apps, they have an offline mode. You can actually record data if you have limited connectivity out in the field, and the minute you drive or move into an area that it reconnects, it pushes this stuff back up. So, we've kind of technology companies have sort of plugged some of those gaps, filled some of those gaps, if you will, with the technology. But you're absolutely right. Bottom line, it comes down to, what would we like and what can we afford? And, there's nothing wrong with that. Businesses are in business for that reason. But I think the more this proliferates in the industry, the more we get away from these sort of, luxury items, if you will, as we see these as luxury items, the more companies that develop this stuff, it drives down, the economies of scale, right? It drives down the cost. It's more accessible. It's easier to get our hands on this stuff. And I think that that's a real opportunity for tech companies out there to really listen to what you just said and say, okay, we can solve some big problems in businesses and industries with some relatively, accessible, affordable tech that's out here right now. And that's key.
Yeah, I think that offline mode you mentioned, Blaine, is really intriguing. I do work in a building that has a lot of restaurant inspectors in environmental health, and they have their tablets that are actually out in the fields, and they're in offline mode when they're not connected. And as soon as they come in, they just dock that laptop or that tablet, and boom, everything's uploaded. And we're actually working on something like that for some of our field inspectors that are at our landfills and transfer stations that are essentially, scanning loads to make sure that there's no unacceptable waste. And there's different applications you can use for inspections at our sites, and we're working through that process. But I do love that offline mechanism where it's you don't have to worry about that too much, because everyone's worried about losing connectivity, losing connection with their staff and their applications, and having that as an option. I think a lot of developers and companies have really keened on into that and said, hey, this is something that is an issue. Especially, you look at oil fields and agriculture and so many different industries where, that can be, whether it's sole workers or large groups of people, connectivity can be a very difficult thing. And I think that option really helps out. Well, let's dive into our final topic, guys, and talk about a little data management. I know, Steve, you and I talked plenty of times in 2018 on GDPR in the European Union, building compliance not only into our podcast and our websites and what we've done with International Podcast Day, but I know a lot of people in the space, both that are working as app developers with businesses or just individuals like you and I, have really gone into, okay, how do we figure out this data management thing? How is it handled? How do we comply with it? And Blaine, obviously you with some international experience dealing with some of these corporations, data management, it's a big thing, right? People do get a little scared when you start saying, okay, we're going to be tracking your name, we have your phone number, we have your training records, we may even have some biometrics, as you said. What sort of experience do you have with the whole data management, both here in the United States and also abroad with GDPR?
Well, first, I would start off by saying, all of this is easily managed when you start with transparency. When you explain to your workers exactly what you are doing and not doing with data and what data you're actually collecting and giving them an opportunity to opt out where it makes sense. Obviously, it's driven by some laws in some countries. So let me start with the U.S. We'll talk about Hipaa. We talked about recording injuries and illnesses, right? Hipaa laws, everyone throws this Hipaa word around a lot, and really it's very specific and applies to specific cases. Where it doesn't really have the same application under the law is, and again, I'm not an attorney, talk to an attorney, my little disclaimer right there, but a workplace injury. See, the employer has a business need to know what is in that injury case. It's actually the law requires the employer to investigate the root cause. The law actually requires the employer to understand the diagnosis and the mechanism of injury, whether you are prescribed something as a result of the workplace injury, because that may make it an OSHA recordable accident that the employer is supposed to record on an OSHA law. So there's actually another law that says, no, your employer has to have records of your workplace injury or illness. And so we kind of look at the two laws and say which one trumps the other, right? Well, in the U.S., it makes it a little easier to record this data and to keep it. And the way we can get around it is relying on these other companies, tech companies, to lock all that down, whether it's encryption, whether it's secured servers, physical locations, things and backups and things like that, where the employer, the company, doesn't have to invest a lot of that, money and capital in building out this infrastructure. We can rely on tech companies to solve this problem for us, like iReport Source. Okay, so making sure that they're able to secure this data and that it's still accessible to us under the law. Now, going abroad, it's about making sure folks have an opportunity to opt out, making sure that you explain to them, when you leave this company, we don't keep your private and personal information, unless, of course, another law supersedes it, saying, like a workplace safety law in some of these countries, saying you have to keep injury, illness, exposure records. In the U.S., if you're exposed to a hazardous chemical that results in an OSHA recordable injury or illness, I have to keep the safety data sheet for that chemical and your medical file for the entire duration of your employment, plus 30 years after you leave the company. So there's laws that drive some of this stuff. It's just a matter of talking to the right people, making sure you understand what the regulations are, and getting help. Companies that make this technology and operate in those spaces in these countries, they know this, right? This is their bread and butter. You can rely on them to help guide you, to help coach you, consult you, if you will, with looking for some of these technology solutions. So I'd encourage anybody who's thinking about doing this and you have data management questions and concerns, talk to these companies and find out how they secure this data. Ask for their certifications, ask for, which compliance regulations they meet or exceed, and then talk to other folks that maybe have used some of this technology. You could find this all online, oddly enough, and you can research this on your own. But that's key. How data is handled is very important. It's trust. There's a lot of trust in this technology. And what I find odd is, I mentioned earlier, the folks that gripe about privacy and everything else are probably also griping about it on Facebook and Twitter on their smartphone. So I think in the U.S., privacy, I think our culture is a little more accepting than in other parts of the world right now.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you guys have found that.
Yeah, so I share that opinion.
Yeah, it's easier in the U.S. We're willing to give up a little more information about ourselves in return for something that we're after, using an app or putting some filter on my face, my front-facing camera or something.
Exactly.
Like that. So what are your thoughts on this, about data management, especially in the IT world for you guys?
I think it's very interesting because I get sucked into various kinds of, I don't want to say sucked up, it's a requirement that should be adhered to on certain kinds of data retention policies, backup, things like that. And, you guys are talking about, I think for the most part, we're okay with what people are collecting, what they're doing with it, until there's a data breach. And then there becomes this whirlwind of you blink, blink, blinks, and look what's happened and those kinds of things. So I think there's a touchy field out there that, I think most people are amenable until something goes wrong with data. And the other flip to that, you mentioned data in being used to generate charts and stats, which really don't mean a whole lot of beans, but it comes down to the personalization and communication between an organization and its employees, or who's ever involved in a proper way to get through either some of these hurdles or for the protection of an individual. So data is very interesting because I know with a lot of the companies I deal with, there's almost a secrecy of it. And with others, it's totally out in the open.
Yeah, I would agree. And the one thing that we talk a lot about in the safety, circles with data is, for every data point, there's a person behind that. So for every dashboard we create and bar chart that we create that shows that our organization had 37 injury cases last year, 22% of them were to the hands and arms, and 5% were to, we strip out all the personal stuff. We're looking for trends where we can focus our energy as safety professionals. Where's our next injury and accident going to occur or likely to occur? What story is this data telling us? It's easy to lose that human element in that. And so whatever technology you use, you have to ensure that you're able to kind of strip out some of that personally identifiable information from those and just sort of get to this sort of the nut that we're after is, what's the most frequent part of the body we injure on our workers, and how can we fix that, and how do we know that? So I think you're right. There's a balance, but you have to be transparent and open and honest with our workers to say, hey, we're collecting this because it's going to help us make you safer. I said it before, there's a lot of trust in this technology, but there's also a lot of trust in safety. We're trusting the employee is going to remember the training that we gave them, provided that it was adequate. We trust the employee is going to follow policies and procedures when nobody's looking. The employee trusts that the employer has given them all the tools and training and information that they need to do their job safely, and that they are going to fix things when I raise a hand. So there's a lot of trust in safety, and we can use technology to strengthen that in that way. But you're correct. I think folks do get bent out of shape when there's a data breach, and I'm still scratch my head and think, have you just pass your credit card to anybody that walks up to the table, and they take it to the back and do Lord knows what to it, So it's funny, we're still in this weird area with data, but I think going forward, it's going to get more secure, or we're going to be able to use technology more. But you're the IT professionals. I would defer to your judgment on, for every lock we put on data, somebody comes up with a new pick, I guess. Is that the rule?
Yeah, that's fair enough.
You're exactly right. It's a never-ending battle, and I guess that's what keeps me employed.
There you go.
That's true. Well, Blaine, we can't thank you enough for joining us here on episode 435 of The Ways of Tech, talking about the intersection of technology and safety. I know, for one, I learned a tremendous amount. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your experience working in safety and working with the tools of technology behind that to supplement worker safety, to empower individuals, also to provide some resources and tools to management and executives to further their cause with not only profits but also safety of their employees, and really learning that intersection of technology and safety. We can't thank you quite enough for joining us. It was an incredible experience. Thank you for joining us. So one final time, where can people go to find more about yourself and your podcast?
Well, the podcast is at www.thesafetypropodcast.com. safetypro.com. I was very creative and actually just named the website what the podcast name was. So that was more for me than anybody else. But the SafetyProPodcast.com. Look, I'm not selling anything, so I have nothing to pitch. If you want to learn about workplace safety and you want to check out the podcast, it's there for you. It's there. It's a resource for you. And I can't thank you guys enough for inviting me on to talk about this. It's good to get out of the safety circles and start talking to other professionals. And mainstreaming safety in this way, I think, is a big step forward for the safety industry. And thank you for having me. I appreciate the time we spent together.
Absolutely. Well, Steve, final word, man. As always, no reason to break tradition now, right?
Well, why start now after all these years, Dave? And I hope you listen to the whole thing. If not, I want you to rewind and get to a place that you can listen to everything that we've talked about. Because the good is, I'm not sure if you just heard a safety podcast or a technology podcast. And that's the good thing. Because we're finding that intersection where things can come together to make things better. When we talk about technology and safety, there's one thing that's important. It's people. And that's what Blaine has brought to us today. I truly appreciate his in-depth knowledge when it comes to this topic, his enthusiasm, and his well-spokenness about the topic. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap up episode 435. To find recent episodes of the podcast and connect with us on social media, just head on over to thewavesoftech.com. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to keep on teching.